want to be a physicist.
I want to be a pilot. Cita-cita saya nak jadi seorang pensyarah.
I want to be a teacher.
Cita-cita saya menjadi seorang polis.
Saya mahu menjadi seorang ahli arkeologi.
Welcome to the Leaderonomics Show. Today we're super excited to have the co-founder and managing director of Teach For Malaysia, Dzameer Dzulkifli, on the show with us. Welcome, Dzameer.
Hi, Audrey.
Thanks for joining us on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Great. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, what are some of your experiences?
Yeah. So I was lucky enough to go to public, private, and in an international school throughout my education career. Education experience, and I was lucky enough to be that kid that suited the rote learning environment. So
what do you mean by that?
I mean, can retain information and then that can regurgitate information
I see,
very easily in that sense. So I had an advantage where I then breezed through school most of the time. Of course, the subjects I enjoyed a bit more, like maths and science, came a lot more easier naturally compared to the subjects I struggled with, like biology and history in that sense. So after I did SPM as well, and then I went off to do the International Baccalaureate program in United World College in Singapore. That was a really great experience because it was more of a holistic education. They didn't make you say choose science or arts. You had to do both. You had to do languages, you had to do maths, and they made you do philosophy, like an introduction to philosophy, sports, something community service, and something creative as well.
They take quite a different approach to education, don't they?
Yeah. So very holistic in that sense, and trying to give you as broad of an exposure before then narrowing you down. At least I then went to the UK for a degree in engineering, which, knowing the education system in the UK, is like specialized immediately. So that was my experience in that sense.
What would be one of your biggest takeaways, you think, from your educational journey?
I think it's that it suits certain people. Not everyone is geared up for it in that sense. Personally, for me, I think it was at later stages in my education journey that I realized the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. So fixed mindset being, hey, if I'm not good at something, I'm not going to try. Whereas a growth mindset says you can learn almost everything and anything, depends on how much time and effort you put in. And
how did that change the way you approached academics and the way that you learn?
Well, academics was straightforward for me. It was the other things that I wasn't probably as active in. Like I never played a musical instrument. I probably did dramas and plays. Community service also wasn't as prominent, at least in that stage. So from a growth perspective, what was seeing different people having that, living that up, right? So in UWC, I had a roommate which was half African and half Caucasian. He was German by nationality. He was really built, so he played rugby. So that was a given, right? But he also played the violin. So I was So I was just like really surprised to meet someone that shuffled between both worlds very easily, and that made me think like, okay, do I have to be a stereotypical, like just
look a certain way, dress a certain way?
Correct. So that made me just explore my identity a lot more in that sense.
Who would you say are some of your role models?
I would say my role model actually is my younger brother. He's 2 years younger than me. I like to say, fortunately, he had dyslexia and ADHD, and I think that's, I think he's also rated borderline special or like, not special in special education way, but borderline genius even.
I see,
Right? And gifted, sorry, that was the correct word I was looking for, gifted. But he struggled with school on a day-to-day basis because he couldn't sit still, he wanted to be active, he wanted to be doing things rather than just learning the theory and probably apply it later in life, right? So he was a bit of a nightmare for teachers to manage.
I would imagine, yeah.
But
in our current system.
Yeah, even in, I would say, even in private schools and international schools, he was a bit of a nightmare, where one of the schools even said he probably wouldn't even finish high school. Right? So I wouldn't want to just label that, okay, not just our education system. I would say education everywhere struggles with this. But of course, a few systems and a few schools do really well. And he then moved him into another school in Jakarta, which actually recognized his gift and abilities and said actually he'll be fine. And he not only passed through high school, but then followed a career, or pursued a career in zoology and conservation to the point of getting a PhD at the University of Zurich, and is now leading an NGO on conservation work in Malaysia. So he is sort of my role model to like say, don't worry too much about the decisions you make, follow your passion, but also don't worry too much about what other people are saying about you and labeling you in that sense.
You don't necessarily have to conform to be successful.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, great. What would you say is the best advice you've ever received?
Best advice would probably be, what problems do you want to solve? Right? A lot of people say follow your passion or follow your strengths. I think those are good, but the greatest advice is like, what problems do you want to solve? And then that's where you create value. I mean, you hear this a lot in entrepreneurship courses, but I probably didn't really internalize it until like Teach Malaysia came about in that sense, right? That there's a problem with that, like how do you want to tackle it in that sense?
Okay, great. So we're going to take a break right now, and then we'll be back shortly again on the Leaderonomics Show. And we're back with Dzameer on the Leaderonomics Show. Dzameer, tell us a little bit about Teach For Malaysia. What inspired you to start it off?
Yeah, I think there were a few things that came about together. Of course, I just shared about my brother's story. So he followed his passion. So that made me decide, like, look, I need to figure out what my passion was instead of just doing a job. And I loved my job. Then I was a consultant with PricewaterhouseCoopers. But it wasn't like, I wasn't waking up every morning really excited about it. That was one. Another part was also my brother was labeled as a failure in school, and then went off to get a PhD by the age of 29 from the University of Zurich in conservation, and coming back to Malaysia to lead conservation efforts. So I said, like, if someone from our background, which was a very privileged background as well, could have almost been written off, how many other kids are there out there that could be helping, that could be discovering or helping society on scales that we cannot even imagine that are being written off. Right. Finally, and a bit more personal reason was also a bit of sibling rivalry. So mom and dad was talking about him a bit more than they were talking about me. So I was like, you know what, I need to step it up a bit.
But this is positive competition,
Yes, correct. Yeah, for sure. I think that's the really great relationship that we have with the family as well. So that just made me decide, like, I mean, reflect a bit more, like, what is it that I wanted, what did I want to pursue? And it made me remember a job application I put in the UK upon graduating from engineering school. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I put in an application to Teach First, which is the UK equivalent. And I fell in love with the whole idea of the Teach For model. Was that, number one, you're trying to solve the problem that a child's background often determines his or her outcome in life. Right? Do you tackle the education element of it, or do you tackle the poverty or socioeconomic background levels, right? Challenges. But Teach First offered a solution, was that not just you tackle from an education perspective, you also tackle it by getting the best talent into the program. So similar to the points that Leaderonomics pushes around leadership and development, we're trying to tackle that from a talent perspective. The teacher is not just teaching a subject, but it's actually leading and inspiring children on a day-to-day basis. And then they do that for 2 years before deciding what they want to do in the long run. And with Gen Y, or even millennials now, like, trying to think of a career or job in the long run is something none of us would dare do.
Yeah.
We want to take bite sizes until we're okay.
Yeah.
So the 2-year program became a very attractive development program that then allows people to decide where and what they want to do. And we've seen almost like 80% of our alumni remain active on a full-time basis in the social education sector.
Okay.
So I got rejected by Teach First.
Oh.
So that was like, wow. I was like, if I got rejected, I mean, I needed to work on a few skills, of course, but it just made me realize would I get rejected in a program in Malaysia.
Okay.
And by luck, having it, met a colleague of mine that wanted to do something, and we both agreed, let's try to explore Teach for Malaysia. And we were just very lucky that the Economic Planning Unit, the Ministry of Education, and a few other donors were looking into the same thing. So we showed up.
Stars sort of aligned,
Yeah.
the right timing.
So it's also the saying that the universe conspires with you to find once you decide what your passion was. So that further reinforced that lesson I learned from my brother, that if you follow your passion, everything falls into place.
Yeah. It takes perseverance, though, I'm sure. Yeah,
I think I mean, I would say there was a degree of perseverance, but there was a greater degree of luck. Some of the things like just did not know how it came together in that sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. In a nutshell, like really quickly, how does the application process happen for somebody who's interested?
Yeah. So you apply online. You go through a essay-based application.
Okay.
So we want to really go into like your reflective nature, because again we're a leadership development program.
Yeah.
After that, there's a phone interview, but the best part is the assessment centers that we run. There's a 7-minute mock classroom.
Right.
There's a group case study around like as a bunch of teachers, you're trying to solve a problem in the school, and then of course a one-on-one interview.
Okay. Typically, how many applicants do you get?
We get around like 800 to 1,000 applications a year.
For every batch, yeah?
Yeah.
And how many get selected?
Normally, that make it onto the program is around 6%. So about 50 to 60 annually, and we see how much.
Okay.
people-
Is it more due to the fact that they are not qualified in terms of their skills and knowledge, or is it more that there's just a limited amount of, I suppose, slots where schools would take teachers in?
Right. At the moment, the barrier is actually in the recruitment. Enough people that can and care, that want to make a difference, that make it through. Of course, there's a level of like clarity of skill sets, but I wouldn't say like just knowledge. What we look for is leadership skills.
Okay.
Are they sure about why they want to do this? Are they sure? Have they demonstrated evidence of being able to overcome challenges, being able to work with a diverse set of people? We can't take people just on the basis of like, I want to do this. We need to take it on the basis of like, you've actually proven it to some degree. On projects at university or hobbies on the side, that then give us the confidence that you can do it, right?
Do fellows drop out?
Yeah,
They do.
especially in the early years when we didn't really know how well to select and also prepare them in the classroom. We probably had a bit more like a 10% dropout rate in the first 2 cohorts, but we've managed that tremendously well and gotten them down to 2% now.
Okay.
So not only do we select very rigorously, but during a 2-month pre-service training, there's a bit of an additional like evaluation before they actually start in the classroom. Because we want to minimize the damage to the students.
Precisely.
Yeah. Like once that relationships have been built, etc., and then them pulling out. But of course, the 2% happens due to either health reasons or financial reasons in that sense, family concerns.
Okay.
But I think the biggest barrier, also coming to your question early on, has actually been expectations from influencers or role models, right?
Okay.
So parents have not been as encouraging. We send you to university.
And you come back and teach in.
You're teaching, we're growing older, we want you to earn money. Or even like uncles or mentors in the private sector that says, don't do Teach for Malaysia. There's no value in that from your career after the 2 years. But a lot of progressive HR units and companies are recognizing that the 2 years is a legitimate career.
Development and
and people are now saying like actually we need to recognize that 2 years and offer them like salary after the 2 years based on that.
Wow, fantastic. Okay, it's time for another break. So we'll be right back again on the Leaderonomics Show. Welcome back to the Leaderonomics Show with the co-founder and managing director of Teach For Malaysia. Dzameer, you were telling us a little bit about how Teach works and how people apply, and you did mention that maybe not everyone is suitable in a sense, right? So what other challenges would you say have been the most memorable or biggest for you in the last few years?
I think going into the education sector and trying to define what an excellent education is, there's of course like a lot of different interpretations of it, right? Like education is for employment. Education is to discover a kid's purpose. Education is to allow the kid to grow to be holistic human beings. And everybody that's involved with that, unfortunately, comes with their own lens and perspectives.
Right.
And that work to create that alignment of that great end vision is very difficult. And because Teach Malaysia is working within the public education ecosystem, we want to be complementing, but at the same time we want to be a catalyst of change. So a great thing was like, actually we ended up saying like, you know what, the most important thing we need to do is ask the kids and the parents, what do they want out of education? So in that process of going through it and discovering it, what we found out is like, it's just a simple definition of empowerment. Are students empowered to be leaders of their own learning, their own lives, and also maybe the future of the nation, right? So an example of their own learning is that kids are not just copying the blackboard, but they're engaging in discussions. They're actually learning materials on their own. Teachers can give them a problem statement. They go out and find out how to solve that.
Right.
That can happen in a classroom today. It's just about how the teacher delivers the lesson. Of their own lives, are they thinking about what do they want in the long run? Is it a job because that's what they see, or do they have other opportunities or exposures that then stretch their imagination about what they want to do? Are they then thinking about what's next after school, or are their parents telling them what to do?
Right.
And finally, I think like one thing I struggle with is still like, learn this because it's useful for your future. I struggle with that because I think we need to make it learn this because you can use it today.
Right.
So Teach Malaysia is running a lot of leadership and empowerment programs that get students to identify challenges in their schools or in their communities that they want to solve today. So that's also the exciting part in that sense.
Right.
Yeah.
And how has it been working with the different schools and the ministries and all these different stakeholders?
Yeah, so I think it's different people like come with their own different backgrounds and experiences that have informed how they view things, right? So the tricky part is about like, how do we get onto the same page?
Right.
And normally like what we try to do over and over is like really highlight the success and the capability and the potential in students. Because if two adults are talking, we tend to talk to each other, not with each other. But when there's a student in place and a student speaking, and especially we try to show like ways to listen to the student a lot more, we find that to be a really powerful way of getting people onto the same thing.
Could you share with us maybe a story or an instance where a student kind of changed or...
Oh, there's so many.
I know there will be so many, right?
My favorite would probably be a story about this young boy, man, called Sean.
Right.
So he was, and especially because he was a student that was taught by our first cohort back in 2012. He was Form 4 then. He was probably working in a restaurant earning 5 ringgit a day to support his family. He worked evenings, and by the time he came to school, he was tired. But his maths teacher, Brian, recognized that he had a gift in maths and asked him to join the Math Olympiad team. So coached him, developed him, and he started like really gaining confidence. Because like the one thing that our students don't hear enough is like, you're good, or you're great, or you're special.
Or you're worth it, and you can amount to something.
Yes. A lot of people approach them from a point of like anger and negativity. So we try to use a lot more positive reinforcements. And that gave him the confidence himself. So from PMR, he went from 2 A's, he got up to 5 A's at SPM. But of course started becoming a lot more active, and when he went for STPM, he got active in school clubs and societies. He got 3.7 CGPA.
Wow,
and then he's like, you know what, I can go to the next step. So he then said, you know, I'm going to do finance and accounting. He applied for scholarships, but he fell short. And by this time, Brian had only taught him at Form 4 and Form 5. So at STPM level, they were just on a texting or calling basis. and well, actually a bit more as well, because Brian actually hosted him at home in Klang so that he could go to school and get his education. And finally, he applied for scholarship, and he was given on condition that you get a band 6 in your IELTS.
Wow. Okay.
But he failed it the first time.
Right.
So Brian was like, you know what? It's all about exposure. Why don't you get an internship with Teach For Malaysia for 2 months, and it's an English-speaking environment, you'll pick it up.
Practice, build up the confidence.
Yeah. So he passed his IELTS, he got a band 6, so he got his scholarship. He's in Sunway College at the moment, doing finance and accounting. So we're like so excited about him. Slowly trying to convince him to come back to be a fellow.
After that.
But he said like, the kids in my school are crazy. So I said, well, you can go to a different school. So I think the best thing would be is like if one day one of our kids end up becoming a fellow that goes back and shows and becomes a role model.
And that's a fantastic story, to see that progression of a student. And also, I suppose, on the fellows part, where it's really beyond the classroom. It's not just what you do within those 4 walls.
Yeah.
Right.
I think the classroom responsibility is just like the entry point into that, is that relationships that are built, that last, in that sense. And today is Teachers' Day as well. So that's extra special in that sense.
Okay, I guess we have so much to talk about, but we don't have that much time. Maybe you could tell us what would be some advice that you would give to a young person who wants to make a difference, who wants to change the world, I guess.
Probably before I go there, can I just do a bit of plug?
Sure.
One challenge that we're doing is actually fundraising for Teach For Malaysia. So we are now just launched individuals to donate on a monthly basis. So 50 ringgit can help us impact 2 students. Because one fellow impacts 150 students. That's where we get the scale from. And if you donate to us in the next 2 months, your donations will be matched by a corporate partner. And it's tax exempt, of course. So I just want to ask for that plug as well.
Right. Is there a minimum duration to commit to?
No. So it's ideally we would like for a year, but people sign up, and then they can stop whenever they want as well. So that's done online at teachformalaysia.org.
Fantastic.
To your question about young people.
So that's one way a young person could make a difference.
Young person, but preferably young person's parents or working adults at this stage. For the young persons, I'd like them to consider joining Teach For Malaysia as a fellow, because whatever you're doing, whatever your passion is, pass it on to the next generation. If the best of us are not passing on civilization to the next generation, who will? But personally for them, I would say, what problem do you want to solve? Like, be it in architecture, in environment, in social development, in economics, you must always approach it from a value creation point of view. And does that problem resonate very strongly with you? And it's normally a small nagging voice at the back of your mind that keeps on repeating itself. But you kind of shut it down because you don't trust yourself or you don't believe in yourself enough.
Or maybe it's so new, nobody's doing it.
Correct. If no one else has done it before, how am I going to be able to solve it, right? But have that confidence in yourself, pursue that small nagging voice, and you'll find a lot of doors open because of that.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today, Dzameer. It was fantastic talking to you.
Thanks, Audrey.
Right. So for more information, do go on to teachformalaysia.org, right, to apply and to find out how you can support this great work that's being done.
And donate.
And donate, of course. Yes. So that's all the time we have today on the Leaderonomics Show. Thank you for tuning in.